All right, you can go.
Okay. On September 1st of 1939, I went down to, I was 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to get my papers to deliver on this Sunday morning, and I found out that war had been declared. Germany had invaded Poland, and the only communication we had in those days were extra newspapers. So I delivered my route and ran right down to the downtown where the Bay City Times printed their papers, and I bought 50 papers for I think 2.5 cents, and I saw other guys out selling the papers, so I just rode on past where they were selling. I got 3 blocks ahead of them. Nobody had been there yet, so I figured that's a place to start selling. So I got in the middle of the street and just went out, extra, extra, war declared, and people came running out of on the porch, and I sold those papers for 5 cents. So I made 2.5 cents on each paper, and I only went 3 blocks, and I sold out my full 50 papers.
That's a lot.
So that was the start of entry into World War II. It was after Germany declared war on Poland. Great Britain and France declared war on Germany in retaliation because they had formed a non-aggressive act that Hitler ignored. So it didn't take Germany long to conquer Poland. Well, then they turned right around and started headed for France because France had declared war on them. And France thought they were pretty well protected because of the defensive lines that they had put up. However, that they didn't hold up. The German tanks just rolled right over everything they had. And it didn't take very long. I think it was in June of 1940 when France surrendered to Germany. And Hitler had started the bombing of England, and they were doing a lot of damage in the big cities like London, and they went into Coventry and completely annihilated that town, wiped it out. And of course, England then realized they had to do something to retaliate for that. So they had a bombing mission go over to Cologne, and they bombed Cologne and did a lot of damage over there. The railroad tracks, which was right next to the cathedrals, but the cathedrals were not damaged because of the precision bombing that England was able to do. Well, Hitler then decided he had to get the rest of Western Europe, so they invaded Holland and took them over. Holland surrendered real quick, and they got into Belgium. They got a little resistance from the Belgians, but not very much. They were just too well equipped to come against a small country like Belgium. So they surrendered, and the German troops went in there because of the opposition that they put up there. They went in and confiscated every bit of metal that they could get. It went right up to the bells and the churches to melt them down for ammunition. Quite ruthless. In the meantime, while Hitler was continuing to bomb England. They were doing a lot of damage over there. However, Hitler didn't realize that England had quite a wall of radar, which was brand new at the time. And these radar units were set up along the coast of Dover. And so the fighter planes got knowledge of any incoming bombers, so they would immediately scramble up in the air and get up above the bombers, so they would meet the bombers about halfway across the channel and come out of the sky and start firing at the bombers. They knocked out quite a few of them. In fact, so many of them that eventually Hitler had to tell Goring, who was in charge of the aircraft, stop the blitz. We can't go. They had lost about half of their bombers.
Oh, I didn't know it was that many.
Yeah, they had about 1,500 at the time, and they lost about 750. So they backed off, which kind of took the pressure off of England. In the meantime, we were just sitting idly by, watching what was going on, but we were trying to help England as much as we could with Lend-Lease operations and sending boatloads of materials and food over to England. But the Nazis had so many submarines out, they had control of the Atlantic Ocean, and they were sinking the ships as many as they could. We lost an awful lot of transports at that time, and they were all manned by merchant marine, so they had no firepower to guard against any attacks. Well, the War Department, they got together to find out how they could stop all this damage that the subs were doing. They found out that they could send bombers out from England and from the States, from Newfoundland, and they could see the subs in the water. Also, the destroyers that were in the sea had the radar that was detecting the metal, and they could direct the planes also, where they dropped the bombs on the subs, and they really knocked out an awful lot of the subs, and they had to Germany had to back off there because they were losing so many men, so much submarines. So it opened up the Atlantic, where the shipping could be a little more receptive to getting through. But they would still knock them off very easily. We did, after the war, we found out that some of the subs had even got into the St. Lawrence Seaway and sunk a ship there. It was not publicized at the time because everything was kept confidential at the time. And I kept watching the happenings, what were going on. We had the draft started, and I knew that somewhere along the line I might be drafted into the Army. Well, then Pearl Harbor came along December 7th, 1941, and that really opened it up, where the next day President Roosevelt went on the radio and declared war on Japan for what they had done. And so then we could really open up the plants to start producing bombers, fighter planes, and so on, and really went into mass production. Automobiles production were just eliminated because they took over the plants for war materials. Well, as things were going along, we were still losing a lot of ground against Germany and Japan, and I knew my number might be coming up pretty quick. So in November of 1942, I enlisted in the Quartermaster Corps, and we went to. I went down to Detroit to enlist, and they put us right on a train. We went over to Battle Creek, where the marshalling camp was, the induction center, and we got all of our clothing and shots and everything right there, and then we were assigned to a camp. They put us on a train. We didn't know where we were going, but we left on, I think, on the weekend, and about 4 or 5 days later, we ended up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, at Fort Warren, which was a regular Army camp. And of course, they had, at that time, they started out the fort with horses, and the horses were kept in barns. Well, there were no horses around there at that time, and they converted the barns to a bunch of cots for us to sleep in. So they had concrete floors, but the big old horse barn was our housing. So that was a good indoctrination. We were immediately quarantined. We had to get accustomed to the Army way of doing things. I know I was due for a haircut, and I said, well, just go in and trim the sides, and yeah, okay, zip, 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 you got the Army haircut. But we had 6 weeks of basic training. We're up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go over and get your chow for the breakfast, and then fall out for reveille, and then get out in the field and we marched every day, and a lot of the guys had never marched before, so it took a lot of training to get some of these guys in line. Mm-hmm. And
but you'd been in a marching band, right? So you already had some.
I'd been in the marching band, like you said, Nick, and so I knew a little bit about that. So after we finished the 6 weeks of basic training, I lost about 7 pounds during that. I went in at 142 pounds, and I was down to 135 at the time. Well, from then on, we moved out of the horse barns over to the regular Army barracks, which were 3 stories. First and second floor, then a big attic. And every Saturday was cleanup day. We had to scrub down from the attic right on down to the basement. And I remember the sign up in the attic. There were windows there that we had to wash every week. But there were signs there, do not shoot buffalo out the window. Those signs are there for years. And so while we were in these barracks, we went to our schools. Some went to truck drivers' school. I went to administration and personnel school. We went to school from 8 till 5 every day, and we had to march down to the school, march back for lunch, march back for the afternoon session, and we had to learn all about their articles of war, and so that it took in the whole regime, daily reports that had to be made. They taught us how to do that, and I read the last part of it was the Graves registration, which was not a very interesting and not a very joyful part of the training. Well, anyway, we ended up after about 3 months there. And it got a time to, I think it was in March, that we said, okay, you're going to be shipped to your units that you're going to be assigned to. Like I said, I enlisted in the Quartermaster Corps, and we got on the troop train in Cheyenne, Wyoming, with our heavy clothes on because it was 31 degrees below zero. And about 4 days later, we pulled into Tampa, Florida, and it was in the 80s at that time. We still had our heavy underwear and heavy uniforms on. So immediately the next day, we got into some lighter clothing, but we were into barracks then, and we immediately caught cold. I think because we had that heavy clothing on to start with. Well, anyway, we got through. We ended up in Tampa at Drew Field, and then we went. By this time, they said, "You're now in the Signal Corps." Well, we couldn't figure it out, but we enlisted in Quartermaster Corps. Take that piping off your cap and put on the Signal Corps. You're now Signal Corps. Okay. Well, about 6 weeks later, they said, "Oh, by the way, somebody made a mistake. You 5 guys enlisted in the Quartermaster Corps, so you have the option to go back to the Quartermaster Corps or stay where you are." Well, by this time, we're pretty well locked into our units. We liked the guys that we were with. And Signal Corps, it was a radar battalion, which was brand new at the time, but very confidential. You couldn't talk about it at all because it was that secret. Mm-hmm. So I happened to be in headquarters company, and the battalion had 4 other companies. And the other companies, we moved on out from Tampa, Florida to Bradenton. And then some of the other companies moved out to other small cities and set up their radar units. And well, the weather down there in the summertime, it rained every afternoon about 4 o'clock, and we got flooded out of Bradenton. We moved to Mayaca, Florida, which was outside of Sarasota, and we stayed there for a while. And pretty soon the rains came again in the afternoon. We got flooded out of there, and the rain started about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the radio operators radioed into to Drew Field to get moved out of there. We couldn't move without their authorization. Well, we didn't get authorized to move until midnight. So we sat there in that water running through our tents and everything. Then we had to break the tents down and get packed up in the trucks and moved into Tampa, Florida. Well, the reason for the delay was the Drew Field had to make room for us to move into. They had to clear out some barracks for us.
In Tampa.
In Tampa, Drew Field. Yeah. So we were there for a while. Kind of the next day, the sun was out nice and bright. We opened up our tents to dry them out and everything. So we got squared around there, got cleaned up, and then we moved on out to. We went into pup tents after that. So we were there for a while, and again, the rains would come. And being in pup tents, why I caught some dysentery, so I had to go into the hospital, and they put me in this one. They had one room left, and I was out on the porch. There was one other bed out there, And I woke up the next day feeling much better. I said, well, good, I can go back to my unit now. And I asked the guy in the other bed, I said, why are you in here? What did you have? He said, malaria. I said, oh my God, they put me out here. Well, anyway, there was no problem there. But they put me in as a bed patient. I could not get out of the bed at all. I said, well, I'm not going to, I'm feeling good. The PX was right across the street. So I had a robe. I put that on, I had some slippers, went over to the PX, and pretty soon I wandered back. They said, hey, Hawkins, where have you been? You got your meal's ready here for you, but you have to get back in bed to have your meal because you're a bed patient. And oh my God, so I had to get into bed so I could eat. In the afternoon, I went back over the PX I went into a barber shop, got a haircut. They came back, get back into bed, it's time to eat again.
What is the PX?
Post exchange.
Okay.
Like a store.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, but by this time I was cured of my problem, and but I couldn't get out. I kept saying, release me, call my outfit and tell them to come and get me. They said, no, you're still a bed patient. You have to wait for authorization. Well, the Army moves very slow in getting anything accomplished. So I think it was, I went in on a Monday, and I finally got out on a Friday. And so I was tickled to death to get back. Well, later on, we were getting ready to go overseas, and they sent us over to St. Pete from Bradenton, and there was no Skyway Bridge or anything like that. It was a motor vehicle route to Tampa and then over to St. Pete. And we had to go through this, we had to fire the grenade launchers, which was a unit that was put on the end of an 03 rifle, and you had to aim it. You didn't fire it direct at the tank, but you had to lob it towards the tank. The idea was to try to knock out the tracks on a tank, and it had a powerful recoil. So we had to do 2 rounds against our shoulder and 3 rounds against the sandbag, and it was a kind of drizzly, cold day, and that shock of my shoulder, my arm was paralyzed for about 3 or 4 days. But I wouldn't go to a hospital because I knew you got in there, you can't get out.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, but just before we left camp, we did get a short furlough, and I thought, well, I could get home for a day anyway. It took me 2 days to get home. I was home for 1 day. It took me 2 days to get back. And after we got back, we got on the troop train again, went up to Massachusetts, camp, can't think of the name of the thing now, but it's outside of Boston. And we were expecting to get on a boat in a very short time, but the boat that we were assigned to broke the propeller. They had to get a new propeller, but it had to come over from England. So we were there 6 weeks just waiting for that propeller to get fixed up the ship. Well, they finally had a troop train taking us into the port there, and it was December 28th. And we got on this ship, and we started out all by ourselves, and pretty soon it got dark, and we woke up the next morning, and all we could see was ships. In the meantime, we'd picked up a convoy, ships coming from all different ports, and we thought, oh, cats, all you could see was ships. Well, we're pretty well protected. There was an aircraft carrier in there just loaded with planes. We thought, well, we were well protected. We found out 13 days later when we got into Scotland, those were not for protection. They were just hauling airplanes over to England. But it took us 13 days to zigzag across the Atlantic Ocean.
How did you sleep?
The ship that we were on was the Empress of Australia. And on there was a plaque from the Japanese government thanking the British for the help that they gave them during an earthquake. And here we are fighting those characters now.
Yeah.
The ship would hold 7,500 troops, and we had 15,000 on it, double the size. So the bunk that we had, they were layered, five high. And you had to go sideways to kind of slide into the bunk. And you had that bunk for 24 hours on, 24 hours off. So one day, every other day, you had to find a place to hang out. And so 13 days of that.
It was a 24-hour rotation? Not
yeah,
even like
24-hour, yeah. And they fed us 2 meals at 6 in the morning and 6 p.m. And we had our canteens with us. We had our helmets and everything. But our canteens were running out of fresh water. So the only time you could get fresh water was between 6 and 6:20 in the morning. But you had to get your chow at 6 o'clock too. So this one day I said, well, I've got to give up the chow line to get my canteen full. And I did. Went back to getting the chow line. It was shut down. So I had to wait until 6 o'clock at night to get some food. So that was, after 13 days of that, was something. We landed in Glasgow, Scotland. Again, got on a troop train. They took us down southern part of England, a place called Maidenhead, and we were there for a few days, and then went to Henley-on-Thames, where we spent a couple of months there, and then we moved on up back to where we come in the Scottish border at Nottingham-on-Tyne, and we were up there, and then all of a sudden we got orders to ship all of our radio operators down to a certain point. We thought, what the devil's going on? Well, the Navy was short of radio operators. They were getting ready for the invasion. So they assigned all of our radio operators to the Navy, and they were on ships during D-Day. And they came back with some real stories, and pretty soon we all got packed up and went down south, and we crossed the channel about D-Day plus 30 with our radar equipment. Mm-hmm. So we landed into France. We went into Luxembourg, and then to Holland and Belgium. And we were in Belgium when the start of the winter. I think it was about October when we got there. And we got word that we were going to get a new radar unit, and our commanding officer had to go back to MIT in Massachusetts to pick up this unit because they had to have an officer to accompany the shipment back there. It was that important. So they got back. Well, the day after the commanding officer went back was the day the Battle of the Bulge started, December 16th. And the weather turned terrible. It was a fog had set in, and I've never seen fog last as long as it did. It lasted about 3 weeks, and it grounded all of our fighter planes, so we could not have any air support from the fighter planes, and that's why Bastogne took such a beating there, because the Germans came in. They were going to take Bastogne, but General McAuliffe of his battalion, 101st Airborne Division, they held out there, took a big beating there. We were just on the fringe of that, and we had some action around that, but not like right in the city of Bastogne. Well, then pretty soon the fog lifted, and the fighter planes could take over and come out, and that turned the tide. And Patton, of course, they had moved his units over there, and they got him on the ground. And then we had the air coverage too, and they knocked out the tanks, and that was Hitler's last chance to. From then on, there was a lot of battles going on, and crossing the Rhine, and we moved from Belgium into Germany, into Munster, and several little villages there, and we ended up in Brunswick, or Braunschweig, is the way Germany pronounced it. That we were there when the war ended, and then they were forming a new radar unit to go direct to the Pacific, and I was transferred into that new unit. So we were moved down into France, and they were giving us all these shots, but we heard about the A-bombs being dropped, and we said, hey, the war's over there. Why are we getting all the shots? Because the Army said to give you these shots. After we got the last one, the next day they came out and said, oh, by the way, no more shots. And he said, you're not going to the Pacific. That's been canceled. But there's a point system been installed. I think it was 85 points. If you had under that, you'd go back to Germany for the Army of Occupation, or if you had over that, you'd go on home. Well, I had 95 points, so I was, again, we waited 6 weeks to get on a ship to come back, but we got back in about 5 or 6 days this time. It was clear sailing right across. And ironically, we went back into the Boston port, the same building that we left on one side, we came in on the other side. I said, my God, it took us 2 years to go from one side to the other side.
Huh.
Well, you were in Belgium. What happened to the church bell in Vletingen? What happened to the church bell in Vletingen?
Like I had mentioned, when Germany got in there, they took all the metal that they could find, and including the church bell, which I told them that.
Yeah, it might have been lost. The recording has been going in and out, but
they used every bit of metal they could get to make ammunition. So
it took you 2 years to get round trip back to the same building.
Yeah, that's right. Well, then finally got out of that camp and went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, which was a marshalling place, and got discharged there, and got the tram into Chicago, and I had a ticket to take the train back into Saginaw, which would get me in at 4:45 in the morning, but I wasn't going to wake my folks up to that hour. We'd done that too many times. So I forgot about my ticket. I booked the airline. I flew from Chicago to Detroit and got a room at a hotel near the bus station, and took the bus station up to Saginaw, and walked in the house, surprised my mother, but she, like mothers have a way of knowing things. She was baking cinnamon rolls and Parker House rolls at the time, and the aroma was just nice to come back to.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So you've got 3 years in a short time here.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
What happened when you went back to Utah Beach? When you went back and retraced your steps, what'd you find?
Yeah, after I had retired, Joanne and I were married, and we were going to go back to redo our route, and we went to Henley where we were before, found the place which is now a golf course, and we went. I went to a Rotary meeting there at Henley, and there was a greeter there. He said, "You're a visitor. Where are you from?" I said, "Well, from the United States." "Well, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, retracing World War II route." "You were Army?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You captured me." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, 8th Army. You captured me over in France." I said, "No, I was 9th Army." "Close enough," he said. But quite a jolly fellow. But he was captured in France, never went back to the continent again.
Oh, really?
And after the war, he was released from the camp, and he got a job. He was an electrician. He got a job as an electrician and worked, and now he owns that company. He married a British girl, and
So when they released those guys, did they just kind of open the gates and just let them walk out, or was there any plan?
Well,
did they send them back?
They had a processing place for him. Of course, some of them had to go back to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
At Utah Beach, what'd you find the kids doing instead of all
Yeah.
the problems?
And after we went to Henley, then we crossed the channel over there, and we went to Utah Beach, where we came in. The terrain kind of went along and dipped down a little bit, and that's where we came through, and because it was easy access. But the pillboxes that were they're still there, all pitted up with bomb shells and stuff. But they had concrete about almost 2 feet thick.
Oh man!
Yeah, and this little dip in there, you could look out onto the channel where we came in, and when we came in, of course, they had all that junk out there to stop us.
Mm-hmm.
But now we looked out there, and here's kids playing out on the beach throwing frisbees.
Wow.
What a change!
Yeah.
But the mulberries were still out there. Do you know what the mulberries were?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wasn't it like the kind of three-way iron crosses that were meant to cut open the bottoms of the ships that were coming in?
They were big concrete boats.
Oh, okay.
See, after when the British were forced off of the continent back in 42 or 43, they had quite an evacuation. Every little ship that they could find to get their troops out of there, but the channel was so rough that it made it possible. These small boats would be overturned, and it was a mess. Well, Churchill had a good idea at the time.
Oh, they built the floating harbor, right?
Yeah, the floating, called them the mulberries. They were boats of concrete. They took them and on D-Day, ahead of D-Day, they moved them in, opened the valves, and sunk them, and they're still there.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but it knocked down the big waves
Mm-hmm.
coming in.
Man, so the other ones could get in.
Yeah.
We went back to Normandy. What did you see at Normandy?
Normandy.
Those crosses.
Yeah, we went to a cemetery there in France, and there were just rows of white crosses, and that was a big cemetery. But the bigger one was in Belgium, where it was just huge. I've got some pictures of those, and there were signs there: silence, there's no talking, no. They're very reverent.
Respect.
Yeah.
Respect.
Yeah, respect. And the friends that we made over there in Belgium have adopted 2 graves, and they keep flowers on there all the time.
That's cool. They do that.
Yeah. And the Belgians, now to us, it was an invasion. To the Belgians in Holland, it was a liberation. And the Belgians have no use for the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
The Bosch.
Yep.
Well, they certainly they were ruthless. German. They took prisoners of war and starved them. The Geneva Convention meant nothing to them.
Yeah. But you said you were retracing your steps, and then you were in Utah, and then where did you go from Utah Beach?
From Utah, then we went to. Just trying to think. We were over there twice. Once we went to retrace our route, and another time was we were invited over for the a celebration that they were having.
Mm-hmm.
And we, after the Utah, we crossed the channel, went over to Belgium, and visited a little town there, Bruges, Belgium, which is a quaint little town. And then took a train into Frankfurt and Cologne, and we ended up spent about 5 days in a hotel right on the Rhine River. Do you recall that it started with a G? We could.
The name of the town?
Yeah.
If you didn't ask me, I'd remember.
Yeah. But
when we went back to Belgium to at the invitation of the people and to celebrate the anniversary, what did they do? What did we do from Bladingen on? What happened?
They said we want you to come back here for
the anniversary.
So then this is the second time you went back then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the second time. And over here, everybody comes from afar to the courthouse where the monument is. That's what we thought we were going to do. Wrong. They had a big field there, and they had all of the army vehicles that they had collected. They put us in a command car, and we had to go from village to village to village. We had to go to them, not them coming to us.
Mm-hmm.
And they wore us out. We were gone from about 9 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
And at each stop, what happened?
We had a little ceremony at each one. And my buddy that was with me, they asked him to say something. He's my spokesman. So I had to do all the talking at all these little villages.
Apples and drinks. at every step. They
Oh,
had
yeah.
little affairs at the schools, and they had parades, and every little town had American flags going back and forth with the little kids, and the older folks were up in the houses looking down with tears in their eyes because they remembered.
Mm-hmm.
But it was liberation to them, and the command car that we were in was playing God Bless America and the Star Spangled Banner the whole time. They had a recording the whole time, and they had an American flag and a Belgian flag crisscrossed right in front of the command car.
Mm-hmm.
So they were together.
So was that when you met the guy who had the huge collection of everything?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
we met him the first time.
He has this collection. He was a Mercedes-Benz dealer, and when he built his garage, he built a place down in the basement, and he was a collector of everything we were throwing away. He collected. He had Jeeps. He had weasels, which were a combination of tracks and wheels.
So was it like a half track?
Yeah,
Okay.
like a half track. And we had command cars and 1.5-ton trucks, 2.5-ton trucks. He had an ambulance, motorcycles with sidecars, and
German and American
all kinds
and
of
English.
uniforms of every nationality. The
So
Germans,
pretty much everyone he just had.
yeah. And they had Nazi flags and white uniforms that the skiers used during the Russian-Finland fighting.
He had Hershey bars, he had Burma Shave, he had candy bars, he had chewing gum, Wrigley's chewing gum, he had blackjack, he had guns, he had knives, he had pistols, he had swords, he had Japanese flags and German flags and American flags.
And then you say he had a collection of watches and explosives
the
and stuff.
watches were unbelievable.
They
He
had packs of cigarettes, Lucky Strike,
Really?
the
Oh,
green. And they,
Yeah.
Lucky Strike, when the war started, they discontinued the green because they could save that green paint.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a white package, which they still have today. Or I don't know if they still have Lucky Strikes.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything he didn't have. He had a buckle, a German buckle.
Yeah.
What did it do?
It was a buckle like that the officers wore, and there were 4 dots there, and what there were 4 cartridges in there. They could take out 4 people before they got killed themselves.
Oh wow! In their belt.
In
had
the
4
belt
shots.
buckle.
In their
Yeah.
buckle.
It was a great big belt buckle, and they could press it from the back. It would detonate those 4 charges.
He had everything that was left. He was picking it up. He had,
Well, there's probably a lot around to pick up.
oh,
Everyone's
you
kinda-
have no idea. There was a little thing. He had some locked cases too, and in the one locked case, it was a glass case. There was a little thing in there, maybe 3 inches high, 4 inches high at the most, and maybe 1.5 inches or 2 around, and it had a clock on the front of it, and it was a glass case. And he couldn't speak English very well, and I couldn't speak Flemish, but I asked him what that was. And he unlocked the door, and he pulled it out, and he pulled this glass casing off. And on the back of it, there's a little clock. And he twisted that, and he looked at me, and he went, tick, 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 boom! It was a time detonator. He had everything. He had everything in that place. He had bullets. He had mannequins all dressed in different uniforms. So he's got everything in that place.
My son-in-law was in Germany after the war ended, and quite a while after that. And he was stationed in Munich, and they were collecting all this army equipment, dismantling it, and burning it or destroying it.
Yeah, I know that they're still picking out shells in farmers' fields and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Even from World War I and World War II, both of them,
Yeah.
they still have undetonated shells.
Yeah.
There are minefields too,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to find all the minefields now. But they had quite a time. What happened to that young German soldier that gave himself up, Don?
Oh yeah, this one day I've forgotten where we were at the town, but it was near the end of the war. I happened to be out by the guard post there one time. We saw this person coming down the road, and pretty soon his hands went up on his head. I said, "That's got to be a German soldier." What? So we had our rifles. You had your rifle with you all the time. Your rifle and your helmet. Those you never let those get out of your hands. But so we had a bead on him as he was coming by. He had his arms up. I said, "My God, that's a young fellow." Turns out he was about 15 years old. And we took him into the battalion headquarters and asked him a lot of questions. He answered everything.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of name, rank, and serial number, he gave answers to everything. And we said, "Well, where's your unit?" He didn't know. He got detached from them, and he'd been living in the woods for 30 days.
Oh my gosh.
And we said, "Well, what have you been eating?" "Berries." And so we asked him if he was hungry. Yeah. So we took him over to the chow tin, and they got some sea rations out. They heated it up, gave it to him. Man, he dug into that like us. And he ate it real fast. We told him to slow down. Don't eat too fast. But he wanted another one, so we got him another one. And he ate that pretty, and he wanted more. And we said, no, you'll be sick. No more. We'll feed you later. But we got a hold of some MPs, and they took him off to a prisoner camp.
Mm-hmm.
But my God, that's where, near the end of the war, they were using everybody that they could get, 14 or 15-year-old kids. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And the Germans, Hitler would not give up. So they just kept bombing the heck out of any place that produced any war materials or where there was activity. And Berlin, they just bombed the hell out of it. And people, "Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" And they forgot about what they did over in London.
Mm-hmm.
And they went through the same thing.
So you brought up C rations. I've heard there's like C rations, K rations. Like, what different rations were there, and what really were they?
The C rations, there was a can that you opened up with, and it was like Spam.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not a very tasty thing. And they had some little crackers or cookies that you could go with it. And they had a piece of chocolate in there that was hard as a concrete. You couldn't bite it.
Really?
Oh, you chipped off maybe a little bit of it and got it in your mouth. And they made them that way so that they wouldn't melt.
Mm-hmm.
But it took you all day to eat that little chunk.
What happened to those? Wasn't it eggs that you were able to get at one time?
When we were in France, one time we had C rations,
mm-hmm.
and you poke a hole in them, and somebody got a hold of a stove, and so there were 4 of us, and we all said, "Well, each one give up a can of C ration." So we poked a hole in it. We're cooking. We got a hold of some eggs that we traded something to get these fresh eggs.
So you were cooking the eggs with your C rations as fuel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
The C rations were propped. That was a prop to hold the
to hold it. Okay.
fry pan. and we were cooking that away, and they were just about ready, and we had fried potatoes in there too. Then all of a sudden, boom! Thing flew up in the air, tipped over into the dirt. Who forgot to puncture their can?
Oh man!
And
we
fresh
lost.
eggs were hard to come by.
Oh yeah,
They
fresh
didn't get
anything
fresh
was
eggs,
probably
so
hard to
yeah.
come
And
by.
here's all these nice eggs and the potatoes down in the dirt. Who, nobody would admit to.
Oh,
Oh God!
that'd make you mad.
Oh boy, we would crucify the guy that did it. Kangaroo court.
Mm-hmm. So, what kind of things were you doing as part of the Signal Corps?
Well, the radar was when radar first came out. Well, they figured, well, communications was a signal part, but later on, but it was always used with the Air Corps. We were in the 9th Army, but we were attached to the 9th Air Force, and we had flyers come into our radar units and would direct. They could communicate with their buddies who were flying the planes, but he was on the radar scope there, and they could direct them to their targets. And first of all, radar was used as defense, detect enemy
Incoming,
planes.
yeah.
And they did, so the enemy aircraft guns could start firing at them. And our own planes, they had what they called the IFF, identification friend or foe. Mm-hmm. And the signal would go out from the radar unit, and he would turn his IF, and they would meet and tell each other, it would signal that friend. Mm-hmm. And if it didn't return the signal, you knew it was the enemy. And heaven help the pilot that forgot to turn his IFF on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When we were having the reunions here, the one we had here in Midland, we got a letter or phone call. I forgot how we talked to this guy, but he was a pilot, and he had been out on a mission, and coming back to his base, he got into bad weather, and he was lost, didn't know where he was, so he put out a CQ, and one of some radar unit picked him up, and they communicated with him, said that he was lost, so they gave him his coordinates, and they directed him through the fog right to the base. They said, "Okay, go into your descent." And when he broke through, there was his landing field.
Oh, wow.
So he was trying to locate that radar unit and he heard of our reunion. He said, "Ask any of your guys if they were the ones that directed me." Well, none of ours did, but
that is pretty cool.
Yeah, kind of interesting. So not only did they be used for defense and offense, but again to locate
help them
strays.
Come back in the storms and everything.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Any more questions that you can hear?
What did you do when you got back from the war then?
Oh.
You got married.
I worked for the Michigan Bean Company when I left, and they sent me every year a check of some kind. One year they sent me a share of stock, and so I went back to visit the president of the company and the rest of the people in there. And I think it was like on a Wednesday. And Thursday, I went down to visit my family in Bay City. And Friday, I got a call from my boss that I visited. He said, "I want you to report to work Monday. I've got an opening here, a packaging unit. We're going to put you in charge of that. And I said, but I've only been home a few days. That's all right. We don't want you laying around. You better get back to work. He was a real, and he was a persuasive guy. I said, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. So I worked at that from October when I got back until about, I think right after Christmas, and the packaging that they were doing, it was kind of a Rube Goldberg affair. The girls would have these hoppers. The beans would come down in there, and they would spill. Well, we had a janitor there that was supposed to be sweeping the floor, and he was an alkie. I didn't know it at the time. So he'd show up, or maybe he wouldn't show up for a few days. So when he wasn't there, I became a sweeper. Well, finally, we got enough bags put ahead. I went in one day and no girls. I went over to the office. I said, what's going on here? I said, well, we had to lay the girls off. We've got too much inventory. I said, does that mean I get laid off? No, we got a job for you. You go down and report to so-and-so. Well, before I knew it, I was lugging 100-pound bags of beans around.
Oh, man.
And I said, this is not what...
not what you were promised.
Yeah. So I told him I had another job that I was going to go to. I picked up the paper the following Sunday, and when I did work for the Michigan Bean, I had operated a little printing machine there, an offset duplicator, which was brand new on the market at that time. And every once in a while we had a problem. I'd have to call this repair guy. He was a sales and service, and he would come in and straighten the thing out. Mm-hmm. So I got to know him pretty good. And he had sold a machine to St. Mary's Hospital. He said, they don't have an operator. Would you be interested in going over there nights to run their machine? I said, sure. So at that time it was 25 cents an hour. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. Well, so I got to know him pretty good. And after I had left the bean company, he hadn't had the paper for a sales and service person. And I recognized the phone number, and I called him, and I said, I saw your ad in the paper. He said, Don, are you home? Are you interested? If you're interested, come on over. I want to talk to you. And I did. He said, if you want the job, it's yours. I said, but he said, we'll have to send you to our service school over in Cleveland. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I went over there and to Cleveland. That was my college education. I'll tell you, it was we had a German instructor, and he was tough. But you found out he had you taking the machines apart, putting them back together, and he'd come along and screw the machine up, and you had to go back and find out what was wrong.
So you really knew how to work with them then by the time you were done.
Yeah. And this one, it was a factory adjustment, and there were three units, three little adjustments in this one area, and it caused the paper to go through or to not go through. And they were very ticklish. I spent a half a day just setting that up right, and I'd walk away and he'd go in and screw it up again. And but by the time I knew how to do it. Mm-hmm. And when I got back to Saginaw, one of my first calls was to McKay Press. Well, they had one of these machines, and the guy jumped all over me, Bill Hopkins. Where the hell have you been? I really caught it. he said, this machine's been down for 2 months. We haven't been able to get anybody over here. I just got the call yesterday afternoon. Where have you been? And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, he said, we've been a couple months here. I said, 2 months ago, I was over in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
In the Army? And I said, yeah. And I said, I just got discharged and just got out of school. Well, get that damn thing working. So the superintendent said, come on. He said, he's pretty excited, but he said, he'll calm down. Well, he took me back to where the machine was, and there was a guy standing there. I looked at him, I said, Bob Beisel. Don, he said, well, where the hell have you been? And the superintendent said, do you know this guy? He said, hell, we used to play softball in the south end of Bay City. And he's, oh my God. And I said, well, Bob, I said, you've been operating the machine. I said, what's wrong? He said, I can't get the damn paper to do any printing.
And you knew exactly how to fix that.
Cover off there. And I said, did you change any of these adjustments? Well, yeah. He said, I've been trying to. I said, okay, that's a factory adjustment. You don't mess with that. But then the superintendent said, well, do you think you can fix it? I said, we'll give it a try. So I got down there and made those adjustments and started putting the paper through. And I backed it off a little bit, and they would start injecting down. So I'd give it a quarter of a turn, they'd go through again. So, and then to give it a final turn without doing any printing, just feeding paper through it. I'd sit back there and let every other one go. And this little detent Paul would operate. If the paper didn't go through, the thing would go down. And the paper was going through, it'd be up. And that kept, and so I kept doing that every other one, just to make sure. And if it would flutter a little bit, it still wasn't right. So you go back and do a little adjusting till we finally got it right. And I said, okay, let's put a plate on here and see what we do. He said, here's a plate. We've been trying to get these forms printed. So we put it on there and started it up, dropped the ink rolls and stuff. Man, that was beautiful.
Smooth.
Yeah, the kid said, oh my God, this is great. Pretty soon the superintendent came back. He says, is it working? I said, look at here. He says, okay.
You bought a car too, didn't you, when you got home? Didn't you want to buy a car when you got home?
Oh, yeah. While I was in the Army, when we went overseas, you had to draw $20 at least. And I said, well, I'm not going overseas for a vacation. But so I'm going to take the minimum amount and send the rest of it back to the bank as an allotment. And so when we got overseas, we got overseas pay. It added 20%.
How much did you get paid?
You got $66 plus a 20%.
A day or a month? Okay.
A month. And I was a T5 or a corporal at that time. Mm-hmm. Later on became T4 sergeant. And I got $78 plus the 20%. So when I got home, I had about, $900 or $1,000, but almost just under $1,000.
That's not bad.
Yeah, because I figured when I got back, I might want to buy a car.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ordered a car, and I got out of school, and I was going to get married on August 31st. And by God, that morning the car came in. And I had another car rented from a friend, and we drove and I got it in the car driving from Bay City to Saginaw. I said, well, I got to stop at the house. I forgot my Toyota article kit. She said, my gosh, why didn't you pack better than that? I said, I don't know. I was just too excited. I guess I forgot it. And I said, besides this car, I'm not too sure how it's going. She said, we're going to go all the way to Toledo with something that we're not sure of. So we pulled in and had the car in the garage in back of where we were parked. And I pulled the car out and back. And she's still sitting in the car. And I said, Greer, I got something to show you. I said, this is the car we're going to take to Toledo. You got your new car. So
it was perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect.
And after you finished at this other place and all over, where did you get your job here in Midland? You worked at Dow Chemical first, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, after Dow had ordered some new equipment, so I installed it all, and then tried to train the operators, which I didn't have enough time because they didn't want to pay an hourly rate that we'd have to charge. And the person that was in charge of the department, it was down at the main office, but then the operations were like in the Stearns building, down across from the courthouse, and the person in charge there became ill, so the guy that was running the department knew nothing about the operation. So when he asked me when I came in there one day, he said, by the way, he said, I want to offer you a job in the Stearns building as assistant supervisor. I got thinking about that. I said, gee, sounds like a good opportunity. I said, I'll let you know. And we lived in Saginaw at the time, and we were both from Bay City. So I came home and I was told that, I said, how would you like to move back to Bay City? What are you talking about? Your office is here in Saginaw. But I said, I've been offered a job at the Dow Chemical Company as assistant supervisor. It makes no difference where we live. She said, I'd love to go back to Bay City.
Dude.
So I accepted the job, drove, for a few months back and forth from Saginaw. Then we located a little place on the Colquhoun River and moved there. Mm-hmm. And I commuted from there to Midland. And then that was in 47. And in 58, where Dow had the whole economy in the country kind of took a nosedive, including Dow Chemical. And Dow then started looking at departments where they could buy the service rather than provide it for themselves, because the idea was to get that many bodies off of the payroll without paying all those fringes. And in order to accomplish that, we had to make a comparison of our costs versus people in Detroit. So my boss and I were going back and forth to Detroit, and in the meantime, I was working for Dow during the day. At night, I was doing a lot of mental work. How could I take this thing over as a private business? Mm-hmm. And the trip, and Ann told me at the time, I said, we just built this new house. She said, I don't care. If you want to sell it to start a business, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. Well, that was a green light. So on one of the trips back, I told my boss, I said, look, if Dow is really serious about doing this, I would be interested in taking it over as a private business with a minimum of change for all the people. Mm-hmm. And he said, you really, I said, I've given it a lot of thought. And he said, well, I'll take it to my boss, Gerstacker, at the time. And so the next day, about 11 o'clock, he had already been to Gerstacker. Gerstacker went with the board, and they knew me, and they said, we think he'd be okay to do this. Mm-hmm. So bang, 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 before I knew it, I was in business.
In business.
Oh, wow.
Took care of that.
I'll move fast.
Yeah, we left Dow on a Friday and came in Monday morning as a private business, right in the same location.
Really?
Leasing space from Dow at the time. I had corsages for the girls, and I had ballpoint pens for all the guys. So we started off with a pretty good. First thing though, I realized in 2 weeks we paid every other Friday.
Mhm.
Boy, we got that first payroll coming up. Man, are we going to be able to make that, or what? With 35 people, and first day's receipts came in. Man, it was good, and so we met the first payroll, and no problem there.
And then you were good after that and just kept
Ups
going.
and downs. Ups and downs.
Well, yeah, as
like
any
every
business.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. I know one year he had to reduce hours because the economy in general was down.
Mhm.
And he took a cut in pay and had to, he said, he called people together and said, either we have to work something out or we're going to have to lay a couple people off. So they took shorter hours.
Yeah,
Well, that's a good business model. I mean, nowadays it's fire people and make more profits. I mean, that was, everyone works together, even the boss, and keep it going.
But I didn't want, we called a meeting and I explained to the people, I said, what had happened. Normally we had a dip in the summertime because of vacations and everything. When kids went back to school, people went back to work. And we'd pick it up again. But we went down and we never came back up. We didn't have that. And I said, oh boy, we got to do something here. And we figured out it had to be 4 people or do something. So I called a meeting and I explained to the people what we were going through. And I said, now, what we'll have to do, it's going to mean the reduction of 4 people. If anybody can give me 4 names, I'm open for that. Well, there's a lot of silence. And I said, okay, I've got plan 2. If everybody is agreeing to go to a 32-hour week until this thing straightens out, that'll mean there will be no layoff of people, but a 32-hour week. That's the best idea that they went for it. And I said, I want to caution you now. If we get a big chunk of work in a certain area, you might find somebody working more than 32 hours. And it might be you or it might be your buddies. But I said, I want you to be aware of that. We're not going to turn any work down just to keep it to a 32-hour week. We're going to grab all the work we can get.
Mm-hmm. And then get it back up to 40.
Well, sure. And I said, in addition, I said, it's a 20% cut for you. I'm going to take a 20% cut in my salary. But I know I'll be working more than 32 hours. I'm going to have a lot more an evening and weekend work. And so everybody agreed that thought that it was a fair thing to do. Well, as things went on, sure enough, we got work in for this area here. Boy, people would be watching that. I said, yeah, that's where they've got more work. They're going to have to, next week it might be your area. And that proved, different places. And that was in October. And at the first of the year, things seemed to be picking up. And I had been working quite a bit there. And people knew it, and they said, well, we can appreciate what you're doing too.
He had several employees that worked a 40-hour plus week at the 32-hour wage.
Yeah,
he had a number of them that did. They knew the work was there, and they knew they had
work which was non-payable job. I mean,
Yeah,
it
but they
was
came in and did it.
clerical work.
That's
maybe.
how dedicated some of those employees were for him.
And so by the middle of January, I could see signs of it. I said, we had another little meeting. I said, look, I appreciate everything you guys have done. And I said, it looks like we're going to be back to 40 hours very shortly. I hope by February 1st. And I said, February 1st, I'm getting the hell out of here for a couple weeks. And nobody said, no, you can't. They said, you deserved it. So I did. I went to Florida for a couple weeks. And
yeah, but at Thanksgiving that year, from our own pockets, we paid for turkeys for every single person at Hawkins Printing and Mailing. And at Christmas, we bought everyone a ham.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
From our pockets. Because we felt that they needed a little boost right there. I mean, we were doing the best we could for them, but that came out of our pockets, not the
That's
printing
right.
and
Well,
mailing.
they were doing the
business.
best they could for you too.
Yep. Yep. I remember going to Kroger's and working a deal with them there to get all these.
Why am I not
turkeys.
surprised that you were out working a deal, City?
I did. I remember that. Yeah, we worked. We tried to. He encouraged them to have a picnic and to have, potlucks and stuff. And they did. They had a good time. And every Christmas, he would bring in the pork loins, the smoked pork loins, and the people would bring in, something to share. And they had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
They had good times.
Even one fellow would go around picking up pop bottles that were 10-cent deposits. I didn't know that at the time, but he collected them. He said, look, I got enough money here. He said, we got enough money, we can buy a grill. Can we put that outside and make hamburgers in the summertime?
Sure.
That's a hell of a good idea. You got the money to buy a grill. Go right ahead.
And he would get, at the time, wasn't it Nabisco had these beautiful, beautiful tins of cookies. And he would order one for everybody and order them for the business.
Mhm.
And we got them. We've got the tins downstairs. They're beautiful. And they were collector's items. But he tried to really do what he could do for the employees. And they appreciated it.
Yeah, it's a good business ownership.
Yeah, I had worked in the troops one time. I knew what they were going through, so I thought, well, let's share.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how to do it right because you were seeing it done both ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I think I have. This is kind of a random one now, more of a throwback. I remember the other day you were telling me a little bit about the Depression that you remembered a little bit, growing up in that era.
Oh.
Do you have any stories about that? Or?
Yeah, that was quite a time there. I was born in 1922, and that Depression hit about 1929. So I was still pretty young, but I knew something was going on. I didn't realize it at the time how fortunate we were. My father had a job. He worked every day. And I had one fellow ask me one day, he said, is your dad working? I said, yeah. He says, oh. He said, you folks are rich. I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, we were walking along the railroad track there at the time, and every once in a while he'd stop and pick up something and put it in a bag. I said, what are you doing? Well, he said, the train went through it. They spilled some coal, and he said, I'm taking this home for our furnace. I said, have you run out of the coal? Yeah, he said, my dad doesn't work for 6 months. And he said, we just pick up anything that we can. And I said, oh my God. I thought, boy, we're pretty lucky. We had 3 meals a day, and maybe it wasn't the best, but at least it was food.
Yeah.
Uncle Chick remembered during the Depression that my dad would go looking for work, and he'd come home at night, and he would not eat until we kids had eaten first. If there was food left, my dad would eat. If there was nothing left, he wouldn't eat. So there were hard times. In Jiddy, your father's father, his family went down walking to the junkyards and railroad tracks and brought home old tires, and his father would cut them and sold their shoes with them, with these old tires.
Oh, wow.
He had a thing in the basement, a stand, and he would sell their shoes with those beat up tires, and he'd send them to the bakers for day old bread. They'd bring them back in a wagon because there were 7 kids, and he was a widower. So there were some rough times. There were some very, very rough times for people. But I will tell you, their folks never went on welfare, and neither did ours. Many people did, but they didn't. They didn't.
In New York, people were selling apples for 5 cents. Please buy an apple.
Yeah,
please buy an apple.
You know, help us along. We're trying to make a living. Yeah, yeah. But there were some difficult times. Well, at the time of the crash, people, you've read about it too, they would commit suicide because they'd lost everything they had. Yeah, and it took a while to come out of the depression. It took a little while. It took a lot of determination. But the depression were not easy times, and you didn't have a lot of money. You didn't make a lot of money, but your money went someplace. Today, there are two people working in a family, and the wants are different too. You know, everybody wants immediate satisfaction. Years ago, if you didn't have the money, you didn't buy it, period. You put it on layaway or you saved for it. A lot of places never gave you credit. Maybe the grocery stores would give, because they were local grocery stores, they knew you, they would give you credit from this week to the next. But that was about the credit you had. You didn't have credit cards and debit cards and all this stuff. So either you saved your money to get it or you didn't get it. Very simple. Like when we were growing up, you know, I remember me, I had a school dress and a church dress. And when the church dress got older, it became a school dress. And when the school dress got older, it was a play dress. You didn't have a closet full of clothes. You didn't have a lot of shoes. You had a good pair for church and you had some for school. And that's how it was with most of the families that we knew. We didn't have a lot of stuff.
I can remember one time, I think my dad was making like $35 a week. And we lived in a rented house that was $35 a month. So 1 week's salary.
Quarter of the pay straight up right there.
Yeah.
But we managed because we knew what thrift was. We knew how to make a penny. We knew how to make a penny turn. But not today.
I always had a job, whether it's delivering papers or hauling cans to the dump or anything to make a...
Yeah, anything to make money.
I can remember the store we used to trade at. I said, anytime you need some help over here, I'll be glad to help you. One Saturday, that was a busy day, people would come in and they'd have to peck potatoes. They'd get a bushel of potatoes and get 4 pecks out of them. And so I got a job there one time, pecking potatoes.
You'd split up the bushel in there and repackage it?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds
It took
fun.
quite a while to fill four bags of potatoes.
Did you ever have to do, when you were in the Army, the stereotypical potato peeling?
Oh, good
I've
God.
always heard
He was on KP.
I was on
Yeah.
KP.
What's KP?
I was on KP. Huh?
What's KP?
Kitchen police. Yeah, we'd been out on a night hike. This one night we got in tired. Oh, my God. And I looked, and there's a duty roster on there. I'm on KP tomorrow. 5 o'clock, the CQ will charge your quarters. He would, you had to put a towel on your bed. He'd come by at 5 o'clock, wake you up, time, KP duty, and you'd go over there and start getting breakfast ready for the guys. Right after breakfast, then you started peeling potatoes. Oh my God, do you peel potatoes?
Oh.
For your big meal was at noon. So we'd peel these potatoes. My God, oh my, never saw so many potatoes. And after the noon meal, then of course you had to clear it all up. And you had all the silverware that that were being used then, and we'd put them in the tub and get them washed, and to dry them, we had a big mattress cover. Put all the silverware in there. Guy get on each end. They would shake it like that. That's how we dried the silverware.
Well, whatever works.
Yeah.
I wonder what they did with all of that stuff after the war. Like, they must have had tons of, like, silverware and kitchen sets. And
Yeah, sure.
Everything.
Out. A lot of them took them home.
Oh, wouldn't you take it home?
Well, that basic camp that we were at, that was a permanent camp.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was converted to an Air Force. So there were no trees around there, so they could make a landing strips there. So I presume that they just kept all that stuff and used it
for them,
for a base. When you got off into your own outfit, you didn't have silverware and plates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You had a mess kit.
How'd you clean your mess kit?
Get all done. You'd have a tank of hot water, and you dip your mess kits in there, and then take it over to cold water and to rinse it off. And that was I never drank coffee till I went overseas, and I started getting it, not to drink, but to wash out my mess kit. So at first there was a garbage can. You dump the garbage in there, and then you'd go to the hot water.
So then this would be when you were out in Europe or
overseas, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the local people would come by buy your garbage can and wait for you to go through, get all the garbage. And we figured, and what do you do with this? For the pigs, for the hogs, they go, or for the pork.
Yeah.
For the pork. And later on, we found it wasn't for the pork, it was for them.
Yeah.
They were looking for any kind of food
Anything they can get, yeah.
When the guys had food, they didn't necessarily have food. So, yeah, they had some hard times over there.
Yeah, and we lived with this one family. 5 of us moved in to this home. And
in Belgium.
We'd the lady would do our laundry for us, but we'd get the soap from the mess from the supply sergeant, and anything in the kitchen. If they had extra cans or something, get it, take it over and give it to the people. Boy, they appreciated that. So that was the payment for doing our laundry. Yeah.
But then she could do her own family's laundry too.
Yeah, she could do her own.
Yeah.
So a minute ago or a while ago, you were talking about how they had marshalling camps. Is that kind of where they just gathered people before they would send them off?
Yeah. Get them
kind of processing.
Yeah.
And that's where you went when you got home too. You'd go to marshalling camp, and they would kind of process you and get you all squared away to head home.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then did a lot of those camps close? Then a lot of the marshalling camps after the war.
The one in Battle Creek, it was turned into a hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Guys came back. One of my buddies came back, and he had a wound in his leg. It had to be amputated. And so he was at the Percy Jones Hospital in Fort Sheridan. I think it's still a fort.
So some of them closed, some of them became other things. It just kind of as the army got smaller after the war, as people were leaving, they just kind of did what they needed to.
Temporary camps were removed. Yeah.
No, say they must have had like a huge, because the army must have had just a huge influx of people. They probably had to have all sorts of temporary camps.
Oh, they did, yeah.
As they were coming home, did people just kind of, I'm sure they were tired from the war. Did they just kind of, get processed and go home, a lot of them? Or did a lot choose to stay in? Or
Some stayed in. They tried to talk us into re-enlist.
Really?
Yeah. And I said, no, thank you. No, thank you. I've had enough Army life.
Yeah.
The majority came home, and they had the GI Bill. They could go to school on the GI Bill, which helped them a great deal, those who chose to use the GI Bill. They also had an insurance policy that if they wanted, they could keep it up. Some people kept it up, some people didn't. But it was a $10,000 life insurance policy for a very small sum of money.
Sure.
So some kept it and some didn't.
So it's kind of thing, just personal preference. When the war was over, you could stay in if you wanted, but a lot just kind of came home and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the women had taken over a lot of the men's jobs while they were gone. So in many cases, the women had to leave their jobs, but in many cases they didn't. So it was a little bit difficult for the guys to find a job in many cases.
Actually, there was a depression after the war.
Yeah, I'm sure. They had such a huge production boost during the war. They had to make everything, and the war ended, and you don't need it anymore.
Had to convert back to automobiles.
And consumer goods and everything. And
and automobiles were really hard to get. You had to know somebody to get
Really?
a car. Yeah.
So who did you know to get your car?
My dad knew the parts manager.
Okay.
And they put my order in, and when my car came in that day, the owner of the agency said, "No, that's not Hawkins. That's got to go to somebody, a friend of his." The parts manager said, "If that Hawkins doesn't get that car, I quit."
What kind of a car was it?
Studebaker. The car that had.
How much did you pay for it?
$1,625.
Did it have a radio in it?
No radio.
Did it have air conditioning in it?
Yeah, you rolled the window down.
It had electric windows?
It had a heater in it.
You were lucky.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It was bare bones.
Yeah.
But that first Studebaker, the front and back were the same. You didn't know if you were coming or going.
So it was just hard to get them because they were still retooling the factories then, right? Just everything was still kind of in war mode while they were switching back. So
yeah.
Was it that way for a lot of things right after the war? It was just kind of hard to get a hold of everything?
Yeah. Refrigerators, stoves, and
everything kind of factory made.
Yeah, and paper products.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. While we were here, we had rationing.
Yeah. Did that last for a long time after the war?
No, not after the war. After the war, it really eased up shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I'm sure that had to last for a couple of weeks or something.
It was different than manufacturing. They didn't, the sugar plants could quickly then sell sugar to the people, where before it was all going to the army, butter, anything like that. It was all.
And as the army was shipping people home, they didn't need it anymore.
That's right.
So.
And people who were coming home needed it, so you could switch that fairly easily.
I had it easy. I didn't know what rationing was because being in the service,
war,
we had.
Well, you knew what it was. You just had to buy a different
We
name.
had hot dogs for 2 weeks at a time. Hot dogs fits this way.
I didn't think you'd ever eat another hot dog.
Down in Florida for 2 weeks, we had nothing but hot dogs. I don't know.
Like just hot dogs or anything else, like with them, or just the hot dogs?
Oh, they'd have something else with them, but your meat was hot dogs.
Oh man!
And we were in Florida, so what kind of oranges did we get? We got California oranges. That was the every way of doing things.
I'm sure in California they got the Florida oranges.
Yeah,
too.
probably.
When he was in Bradenton, he was stationed at what is now the ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying that.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah, they had the right center field fence down. There was a big field back there, and we had 4 battalions back there.
How big is a battalion?
Battalion is about 1,200 men.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, but there's what? I think 4 battalions in a division, something like that, or
let's see.
I don't really know how it goes. How that order system goes.
You had squads, then you had platoons.
How big were each of them?
A squad was about 6 or 8 guys, and a platoon was about 4 times that.
Okay.
And then the company was about up to about 200 guys, and then if you had 4 battalions, you'd have about 800 to 1,000.
So you'd have maybe 5. 5. What was it? The one below battalion. 5 companies in a battalion.
Companies, yeah.
Okay. And then you had how many battalions in a division?
About 8.
Oh wow! So it got big quick.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But you were never up to full strength.
Mm-hmm.
You always guys were transferring in and out and losing fuel here and there.
Yeah. And switching up and everything else. And...
Yeah. During the Bulge, A Company had a sergeant and an officer that went into their supply place to get some provisions or order place in order. But this officer had a P-38, which was a German pistol, and the only way you could get it, you took it off of a dead German officer. So the damn fool was carrying that. And the sergeant was driving the Jeep. And when they finally came across it, the Jeep was overturned. The sergeant was laying there with a broken leg, and the officer had been shot because he had that P-38. Okay, you killed one of our officers, but they left the sergeant there with a broken leg.
Oh wow!
Figured it'd be picked up.
Man. So was that in like for the American forces? I know that a lot of times guys would take kind of souvenirs like that or something, you know, a weapon or whatever else. So I mean, did the Army really care? Or did they just kind of let you guys take stuff and bring it home?
We were never. Different guys would do the scrounging and say, "Hey, get me a rifle or give me some parachute material, stuff like that." And you never seemed to be bothered by it. They kind of turned their backs to it. I know I got a German Mauser rifle, and on one day on a Sunday, I guess, I got some wood, and I made a crate and put that rifle in there and shipped it home and through the regular mail.
And they just let you do it?
Yeah.
So the Army would just kind of, if you had something that you wanted to send back, they just kind of let it slip through?
Yeah.
Well, they probably figured that you'd earned it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't real strict with it, at least most of them. Every so often, I think you ran into
So
somebody
stickler.
that was pretty.
I didn't know if it was a thing, you know, if you were over there and you tried coming back and you had, you know, some stuff in your, with you, if they would be mad about it.
I carried a flashlight, a TL-122. That was the number of it. But it was one of those flashlights that went up, and it was, because you held it like this, and it would shoot up this way. And I carried that thing all the way home.
Really?
And when they were emptying my bag to sort stuff out, I said, "That's one thing that I'm taking home with me." I said, "You're not taking that away from me." Go ahead. Yes.
So kind of, you know, when they were sorting through your stuff, if you had some stuff that you might have brought back with you, they kind of just let it slip through?
I brought home my lean-to, the pup tent. But I had an extra one too. So I always figured if I got home and I have kids, I'd have a tent for them.
Yeah.
But by the time I got home, they got all moldy and stuff, and I threw them away.
I'm sure. They were probably all moldy while you were still over there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any more questions. That might be it. Do you have any more stories, or?
No, I think that went from 1939 to 1945 plus 1960.
Yeah. Sure. And if we ever do this again, I can bring my computer back, and if you think of more stories, we can just record them just as easily. So do you want to...
Can you play it a little bit just to see what...
Do you want to say bye?